Trinitarians will say that the doctrine of the Trinity is the core teaching of Christianity. If this is the case, you'd expect an explanation of it somewhere in the Bible, but no such explanation exists, except that some Trinitarians say that there's a passage in the Authorised version, that's the King James version of the Bible, which they say teaches the doctrine of the Trinity. The evidence, however, is that that passage isn't original, and in this video we're going to show why we think that and what that implies for the doctrine of the Trinity. So subscribe, hit the notify button, and off we go. There we go. There's the passage we're talking about in the Authorised King James version of the Bible. It's quite long. It includes the word, there are these three that bear record in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost, and these three are one. Now, if you have a modern version, you'll find that it's somewhat shorter. There are these three that testify, the Spirit and the water and the blood, and these three agree. Totally different. And the difference is the text there in yellow. That bit has a name. It's called the Comma Johanneum, and that's the bit we want to think about. The point about it is that it's a late addition. It wasn't in the original copy of this letter when it was first written. How do we know? Well, let's look at the history of the text. So 1 John, the first letter of John, was written the second half of the first century AD, I'd say towards the beginning of the second half, but nonetheless, that's when it's written. And the text that we're looking at, the traditional Greek text that's used to produce the Authorised version, is produced by a Dutch scholar called Erasmus. He travelled rather around Europe. He was in Basel at one point, and at another point he's in Cambridge, but he's a Dutchman, and he produces a Greek text of the Bible, and he produces it in 1516, and it's the first printed, or at least the first published printed Greek text of the Bible. There it is, 1516. Now, when he first produced it, the edition he produced did not contain this text, the Comma Johanneum. He put it in because there was a bit of an argument. Some of the theologians came up to him and said, why haven't you included this text in your text? Why haven't you included this little bit in? And he said, well, it's not in the Greek. It's not in any Greek manuscript at all. They argued with him a bit. It's in some of the Latin manuscripts. He said, that's not good enough. They said, what if you could find it in the Greek manuscript? He was so convinced that it wasn't in the Greek text. He said, if you could find it in even one Greek manuscript, then I'll put that into my Greek text. So there's this sort of bet. And what happens then is that the theologians go away, and there is a copy of the New Testament being produced in Cambridge at that time. Someone is copying that from an exemplar. And this one is manuscript, it's got a number, it's number 61, and it's known as the Codex Montfortianus. And in 1520, it's completed. They rush it over to Erasmus and say, there you go. And Erasmus now is on the third edition. He's got minor mistakes in his text. He corrects them in each edition. In the third edition, he is forced to put it in. He said, I'd rather be thought to be a fool than a man who breaks my word. And so he puts the text of the Comma Johanneum into his Greek text of the New Testament. There's the Codex Montfortianus. It's been copied away, and it's quite elaborate in the early parts of it, with bits of illumination and so on, but you can see where the news comes. We've got to get it finished quickly because the handwriting becomes a lot plainer and the illuminations vanish. And well, there it is. The Codex has this text in it. We know that the manuscript it was being copied from, that's called the exemplar, didn't contain that text, didn't contain this little extra bit, because if it had, they would have to take that and show that to Erasmus. They couldn't do it. So the Comma Johanneum was not in the manuscript from which this copy was made. So Erasmus puts it into his text. That is then continued through later editions, and when the printers start printing many, many copies, and it gets established as the main text of the Greek New Testament for a couple of centuries, that text is in it thereafter. But it's something that was put in as a result of a rather unexpected bet by Erasmus against some other theologians. Let's think a bit more about the evidence. The New Testament, of course, was written in Greek, so the first place we'd look would be Greek manuscripts, except there aren't any Greek manuscripts much before this Codex Montfortianus, which contain the Comma Johanneum. It's just not there. Not only that, we have various theologians in the early church who quote from the first letter of John, and they don't include the commas. So Clement of Alexandria, for example, or Cyprian of Carthage, they both cite 1 John chapter 5, verses 7 and 8. It's in their writings, and these are people who are heading towards the doctrine of the Trinity. So it would make their case if the Comma Johanneum was in there, but when they quote it, they don't put it in. You've got people like Athanasius of Alexandria. We've got Sabellius, who's considerably earlier than that. Origen. These people are producing arguments in favor of a sort of secondary logos God. Athanasius is beginning to get into the Trinity, and they don't include that passage in their dissertations, although it would be incredibly important for their argument if they could find it, but they never quote it. And later on, well, people say, what about Tertullian? He quotes from it, doesn't he? Or Jerome or Augustine, even Cyprian. They have the phrase, the three are one. They're talking about the Trinity. You might expect them to say the three are one, but there's no reason to suppose they got that from the New Testament. It's just a small number of words that they happen to quote. So there's no evidence. In fact, the evidence is strongly in the Greek fathers against the inclusion of this passage anywhere in the New Testament. What about the development of the Latin text? Well, the first place that we see the Comma Johanneum appear is in the writings of, well, it could be Priscillian of Avila, or it could be his immediate successor in Avila. And there's a book called the Liber Apologeticus, and that is a sort of collection of texts that are used to prove doctrinal points by Priscillian. And there it is. And he doesn't really say it's part of the Bible. He quotes it more as a commentary on 1 John 5, verse 7, than actually as definitely a definitive part of the text. But it gets added to Vulgate, the Latin Bible of the day. The standard Latin Bible is called Vulgate, and it appears in the margins of that as a comment, but only in a few copies made in Spain. And then it starts to appear in the actual text. So it's moved from the margin into the text of the Vulgate. And from the 7th to 10th century, you start to see it appearing in old manuscripts of the Vulgate. But it's not a majority by any stretch of the imagination of the texts. The 16th Vulgate, produced by Pope Sixtus, and in 1590, and he produces a text, or scholars produce a text, which is based on the majority of Vulgate manuscripts he can get. And it's not in that. It's not in the majority of the manuscripts that was consulted for the 16th Vulgate. Clement, his successor as Pope, has this revised and produces the Clementine Vulgate, but that's revised in line with the Catholic doctrine of the day, and there the comma is inserted into the Vulgate. So if we put that together in a time chart, Well, remember, there are no quotations in the Greek manuscripts. There's no quotations among the church fathers. There's Priscillian, quite a long time after 1 John is written, and even he only includes it as a comment on the passage. From then on, you get it appearing in Latin manuscript, in the Vulgate. Gradually, the number that contain it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, but even by the time of the 16th Vulgate, it's not a majority yet. There's the Codex Montfortianus, just after Erasmus has produced his first Greek text. And of course, there are another few produced after that. Now, there's an extra point here. The Codex Montfortianus clearly has a translation of the text from Latin into Greek. It's not translated very well. It produces something which is good Latin style, but very poor Greek style. Erasmus then tidies it up a little bit. It still shows signs of a Latin origin, but he has changed it a little bit to make it fit more the kind of text that you'd expect in the New Testament. And these other manuscripts, copied rather later, include it from the text of Erasmus, exactly as Erasmus wrote it, not as it is in the Codex Montfortianus. There's one other Greek manuscript that contains it. That's manuscript number 629. That one is Latin Vulgate, and next to it a Greek text. The Greek text is, well, it's got variations in it from the standard Greek text that everyone else has, where it's been altered to fit in with the Vulgate, which is on the other side of the page. And this has the Comma Johanneum in a very much a Latin version, just translated directly and absolutely literally into Greek. So that's the only earlier one. But basically, the evidence is not there for that text. The evidence is strongly that that text was not part of the original. It's not in the original text. It was added later, and we can go further than that. We can say it was added deliberately. People put it in there because they wanted the teaching that it gave. It's a deliberate alteration of the text of the Bible. So why would they do it? Why would a church scribe alter the text of the Bible to insert a verse about the doctrine of the Trinity? And the answer is because without a verse like that, there isn't a Trinitarian verse anywhere in the Bible that they can appeal to try and make some kind of explanation of the doctrine of the Trinity as it stood in the church. Are there any other examples? Well, we call things like that orthodox corruptions. People change the text so that there's no mistake that the teaching they want to be in there, the teaching they think is orthodox, appears in the text of the Bible. They call those orthodox corruptions, and there are actually quite a few places where that's been attempted. But what happens is that they tend to fail. Some scribe makes a change, and you find it's in one manuscript, occasionally in two, sometimes even 3 or 4, but no more. The other people don't carry on the copying. Almost every time it's failed, but in this case, it succeeded for a while. There it is in the Authorised version. With Erasmus, he was forced to put it in, and because of printing, it spread well. So even there, it's failed because it's been spotted and taken out again. Of course, not every time the Comma Johanneum stayed there for a long time. There's an issue with John chapter 1 and verse 18 with an orthodox corruption in it now, and I don't know how long that'll last. But the point is, be careful. If something seems to be too good to be true, it probably is. So watch out for these apparently super orthodox verses appearing suddenly in the Bible from nowhere. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, YouTube have thoughtfully put a button for you to press. So click on the like button. You can subscribe to the channel. That way you'll find other videos on similar subjects. If you hit the notified button, you'll get notified when we have a new video. And you can always visit our website. There's the address up there on the screen, so it's worth a look. We've even got a complete Bible exhibition in there. So have a look. It's also got the text of a course on the basics of the gospel. So thank you for listening, and may God bless you.